Well, good evening, everybody. We're back here with another Jazz Matters podcast. And today, of course, we got the incomparable uh, Miss Renee Clark, who's a composer, songwriter. She just does about everything nowadays. And I'm glad that she's here because I've been trying to get up with her for a while. And of course, we have a co host here, Vaughn Coulter from Jazz Beats Radio. And just before we get into everything, I want everybody out there to subscribe. You can go to yesjazzmatters.org and you can subscribe to the page and to the podcast. Also, you can look and you'll see the Jazz Matters store there. So go on over there and pick out something that you want, like this T-shirt right here, and there are many things to pick up over there at the store. We're adding things all the time. So what we're gonna do now is like Vaughn. See, Vaughn has got he's got the big one, But I know that, like I said, subscribe to the podcast and go to Yes Jazz Matters and learn everything that we do over here at Jazz Matters. We are like a 501c3, so you can donate also. We're gonna get into Ms. Clark. Now, Renee and I go back a few years.
Just a few.
Yeah, just a few. And the thing is, I think I met you, Renee, over at Tony Billups Music Studio downtown. And I think you had not long came out of school. You were up at Berkeley, and when you came down, you told me that you had been there, school there. And over at Tony's place, Tony Billups used to have a music store that sold sheet music. And I think I went up there. I forgot exactly where I was up there that day. But then that's when I met you, because she introduced me to you. So so that everybody else will know who you are, Renee, just let everybody know, who you are, how you got in this business and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm Renee Clark, and I've been around the Atlanta area. I'm actually born and reared in the ATL, and went to school at Berkeley, and came back and jumped off into the world of jazz back in the 80s. It was the world of, it was so many clubs. So we were doing everything that you could imagine, jazz and funk and R&B. And I crossed over and worked with pop or country bands, and I had a background in gospel. And after a little while, that opened me up into the world of theater, which I spent a lot of time in storytelling. I became a music director. I was back in the days of Jamundi. And I left the United States to do a Department of Defense tour in my early 20s. Later, I left to do a solo tour in Morocco. And then I left in the late 80s, and I didn't come back until 2000, as a matter of fact. I went over and eventually settled down in the Scandinavia area. I lived in Norway and became quite a popular face in the world of Norway. And so I moved back, and I've been doing a lot of theater. I worked with Horizons, the Alliance, Theatrical Outfit, Actors Express, who not, Aurora, and who not. And yeah, it's been a good ride. It's been a really, really good ride. And I remember that with you, Edwin. Every time I think about you, I remember you said, "Do you know any tunes?" And I think I had about 3 songs.
Yep, that was about it.
I remember the one song that from George Duke, and that was it. And you were so patient. You were so patient. It hasn't always been like that with everybody, but we did that gig, but we did the gig.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun anyway. The whole deal is like, usually when I work with musicians that I haven't worked with before, uh, I don't really try to push, anybody to do anything, you know what I'm saying? Because I want them to feel really comfortable. So I'll definitely get, so to say, in the mud with them, you know what I'm saying, to make it all come out right, because you're already there, and there's no need to have an attitude about this, that, or the other. And then just try to compliment the musicians and make them feel good. I like that. I just don't care for people that already have an ego and think they're at a level that they're really not. When I'm really quiet, then that's what's happening.
Oh,
But when when you when I'm talking back and forth, encouraging you, that's not happening, right? So
yeah.
that's how it is. But you stated that of course, you went to Norway, and I think I remember when you had left town. Did you get a chance to do any jazz while you were there?
I
And if
did.
so, how was the music scene when you went there in the late 80s?
Um, well, as a solo entertainer, I was mainly booked in hotels and nightclubs, and ran into some jazz musicians, and they pulled me in to their circuit. Not a lot, but a little. Um, I can go back to my background in jazz. So um, I was introduced to jazz really late. I feel like I was late because I was a preacher's kid, and a very conservative preacher's kid that felt like all music other than gospel and was just like not appropriate for me to listen to.
Mm.
And so when I was in high school, my band teacher, Ronald Hampton, you may know him.
Oh yeah, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah, Ronald Hampton was my high school band teacher. Uh, he pushed me into jazz. And in fact, he pushed me so far as I was actually the first African American student to play in all-state jazz band in Georgia.
Okay.
And from there, he helped me figure out. I had never heard of Berkeley. I just never knew about this world,
Uh huh.
and I didn't understand it. And I was there, and it was just like, what is this stuff I'm listening to? I'm not sure if I like it or not. And I tell you, it has taken a lifetime to hear it. Like about a year ago, I was listening to something and I was like, I can finally hear the conversation. I can actually hear it when it's done right.
Right.
When when the passion is there and the language is there and the vocabulary is there, you can hear people talking to each other, and it made sense. It just made sense. And all this time I was listening to a lot of technical stuff that was quote unquote jazz, and it just sounded like noise to me. And I got it. It was noise. And so sometimes in Norway, I can seg back to Norway now. And I went into this club one night, and everybody was super intelligent. And it was almost like I was sitting in a really bad classical scene. And they were playing what they called jazz, and it just had nothing. It didn't have any heart. It had a lot of notes, and there was a lot of intellect, and there was a lot of technique, but there was no language. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And so for a long time, I thought I did not like jazz because I couldn't hear it right. When you hear it right, it's another story. And so sometimes, we play in between genres, kind of in between R&B and jazz, or in between something, but not jazz. Jazz has a particular sound, and I heard it. I was listening to um, I was listening to uh, um, a conversation at a party. A lot of people were talking, and it was the intermission music, and it was, and they're just going, and then this jazz song popped in, and it was like, wow, it's the exact same thing only is being done with instruments, and it's so much fun when it's right. Can you agree?
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, what's happening, that usually gets a person uh, thrown a little bit, especially a musician that's coming out of another genre. It's the most important part is for them to learn to hear the conversations. Uh, all of it's in, a lot of it is about phrasing. When you interpret the phrases that jazz performers are dealing with, you can hear the conversation then once you can interpret the phrasing. As a matter of fact, that's what Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and other jazz vocalists used to do. They could even John Hendricks Lambert Hendricks and Ross. He could interpret the phrasing of the instrument.
Hmm.
Once he did that, he could put the words to it. You see what I'm saying? And rhythm of that same conversation. Like you said, you heard the conversation at that
Hmm.
point. Just
Hmm.
like Ella would hear the conversation, even if she didn't really know all the words. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because that was
Hmm.
one of the things that, a lot of people used to say about her. She didn't know all the words, but she could definitely phrase when she starts scatting. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely.
You are still in the conversation because you're still paying attention to what she's scatting about.
Yep.
So yeah, you're exactly right.
I remember early in my career, a friend of mine, I was like, I can't really improvise when the chord doesn't move. I need the chord to go from, to the one, to the something, to the something, to the something. And when the chord just stays right there, like, what do you say? So he takes me to Paul Mitchell.
Hmm.
If everybody remembers the great Paul Mitchell, he takes me to Paul Mitchell, and I explained to him in a very intelligent way, what can you do on one chord, which he sits down and he plays for about 15 minutes
Right.
on one chord, on one
Right.
chord. And I was like, oh, that's what you can do with one chord. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And that's called, like, getting inside of the chord itself, because you know, there's more to it than just a blues scale. You see,
mm-hmm,
and what he did was took you through every way you could do out of all the tones in that chord. And like you said, it take about it. You got a good little bit of listening to do to hear all that, and
yeah,
it makes sense once somebody can sit you down like that and show you really how to get inside of the chords and so forth.
mm-hmm,
I
yeah,
hear a lot of the young musicians that right now, uh, they tend to emulate only the sections of something like that, like when you're in one chord, the speed of what they're doing versus getting into really what the foundation of the chord itself. In other words, they like to play uh, the 20 note phrases, you know what I'm saying? And because you play them really, really fast, but at the same time, what they end up doing is repeating that phrase over and over and over again. So they really hadn't gotten deep enough into the chord to make the movements like they should. The conversation is different. Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like uh, when you hear a crowd laughing, that's as deep as it goes. You know what I'm saying?
or
That's it. You know.
or when you hear, I know you know these, I know you know this type of people that that loves vocabulary that no one else understands, and they
Yeah.
just use
Like
a
they
lot of
speak from
seven
a
syllable
thesaurus.
words.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's sort of like and there's nothing wrong with that, but it reminds me of like somebody like Michael Eric Dyson, who sounds like a thesaurus when he talks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You have to go get your thesaurus to keep up with him. You know what I
right,
mean?
right, right. James Brown
Yeah,
said, "Ain't really saying nothing." You put, what is it? What is it? James Brown, you
talking
talking,
loud and saying nothing.
And they
ain't
say
saying
nothing.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, because it's amazing what you can do with four notes. You
oh yeah,
know, just when the approach is right and you're really trying to make a statement
right,
instead of just lots of scales and how fast can I go
right,
and how many tricks do I know, but to
right.
actually sit down and try to make a statement.
Yeah, That's the
Yeah.
whole. That's the key. You know, is learning those phrases in the language itself. Now, do you think? How do you think the technology today has influenced jazz music, or has it?
Of course, it has influenced jazz music. Uh, well, first of all, language is language. Language has to be practiced, and language and vocabulary and conversation is something you have to have with somebody else.
Right.
And if I'm playing against something that's pre-recorded, that means what's pre-recorded is not listening to me. It's just playing.
Right.
So there's no conversation. That I feel has affected the music, that we're not listening, we're just playing. And I think that's the saddest thing that could have happened. When I went back and listened to older jazz, because when I came through school, it was like George Duke, name somebody else in the era of the 80s.
Well,
Um,
I mean, there was well, a bunch of them was still out there. Besides Duke, Herbie was still out there.
Herbie
Herbie.
was out
You
there.
know,
Yeah.
and
Miles.
well,
Well,
Zawinul,
okay.
you know,
Yeah,
people like
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
But they were coming from. They basically made a transition
Right,
into the technology. You see what I'm saying? They all come from the acoustic background, but they
right,
just
Right.
made a transition. And the reason for that was simply that the airwaves or mainstream radio uh, was more receptive to what they did because they used the electric instruments. And so they
right.
just basically turned things around. I mean, like you said, Miles did the same thing, you know, just turned things around to get that younger voice at the time to listening to what they were doing, you know.
And that was good. So that was my introduction. But when I have gone to their their mentors earlier than them and listen to the older cats, and
Right.
I could really hear, oh my God, it sounded like a revival. Somebody passed me a Coltrane at the Blue Note, just a cassette tape,
Yeah.
and said, listen to this, Renee. And I swear I was at a revival meeting. It sounded exactly the same. It sounded like people were shouting and praise dancing and
Mm,
spinning. And it was just like, yeah. Now, if it was going to be this experience in jazz, which that's what sold me, I could live in that all day and all night. But I rarely experienced that, because what you said, a lot of times in playing with musicians, it would be this really this kind of funky attitude, this arrogance,
mm-hmm.
and so the joy in playing it and talking to each other, just it didn't exist. But
Right.
when it happens, and it happens, and you come home after a gig and you knew it happened, and you just high. Yeah, that's some good stuff right there.
Right. That whole situation, um, a lot of times, you know, you kind of have to navigate the water, so to say, when you're dealing with certain individuals. Like I say, the attitude has a lot to do with it. The conversation on stage, there has to be a conversation on stage when you're dealing with jazz. You can't just. I've seen musicians where they don't listen; they just wait for a solo,
Yep.
and when they start playing, it's all about them and their solo, and they hadn't listened to what was going on around them, and it sounds crazy to me. It sounds like a jam session going awry. You know, it's like, wait a minute, where's everybody going? You know what I'm saying? This guy's going off on his world. This guy's going off in his world, and it doesn't make the music. It doesn't have the conversation, and like you said, that spirit in it. It's somewhere else. It's not
Yep.
there. You know,
Yep.
everybody wants that spotlight, so to say. You know, instead of
Yep.
playing together. You know, so now when you ask the question, or you've been asked the question, what is jazz to you? What is it to you? You kind of gave me a little bit of an answer when you were saying it. You know, it's the conversation. on stage that the musicians have. Uh,
Mhm.
is it some kind of way you can explain just what it is to you, the way you feel about it, jazz itself?
Yeah. I could do that, and I feel like I'm gonna repeat myself, but I feel like this art form, this musical art form, um, it's like it's sitting me in a particular room, which would be the song, and each room is different. You put me in this room, and whether this room is made out of gemstones or wood or different colors, and you put me in there by myself and say, express, tell me what you feel, tell me what you see, and that's me, and that's jazz with me all by myself, just expressing. And I can sit and I can play colors and be, where this composer, this songwriter has written this body of work, and I sit inside of it and say, I understand what you were saying, and let me speak to the world what I'm feeling inside your body of work.
Hmm.
Or you can put two people in this body of work and we express it together. Or you put three people and it just expands from there. Or you say, let's not put me in anybody, any song at all. Let's just express what we're feeling at this moment. And then we're in a different form of jazz. But it's always about the interpretation and the expression of what I'm sitting in.
Yeah. Well, I could accept that because you know the interpretation and expression. Uh, as a musician, how do you relate that to now? Now you do a lot of theater music, music for theater, live performance theater, and are you drawing from that same sense of the music, that the conversation? Because when you're dealing with, let's say, a cast of actors, the music has to kind of accent basically everything they do, you know, to a point. Can you explain how you maneuver through that those waters, so to say?
Oh, oh, absolutely. It's the same thing. Like sometimes you hear score, you receive this score, you receive this body of work, uh, and if you just play the score as written, it's usually foul. It's really pretty bad because that when the score was written, it was for another group of actors. It was for them. It worked for the original cast. But if you're not paying attention to what this set of actors, the way that they are approaching a scene, the way that they just did the scene itself, and all of a sudden, like what you just said about somebody taking a solo who's not listening to what happened prior to their solo, then all of a sudden the song comes on and it sounds like somebody just cut the lights on at a basement party and it just went awry. If you're paying attention though to the scene, sometimes the song can't be as fast as it was originally done because the actor, the scene wasn't, the speed of the scene didn't match. Uh, you
The rhythm of the music.
Right, it
Yeah.
didn't.
It's out of sync.
Original. Go,
It's out
go
of
ahead.
sync.
Right.
Yeah, I would
It
say
is.
it's out of sync. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I use the same concept in theater, and even like what which is really hard today. Like I think the best thing that could have ever happened to us was YouTube, and I also think the worst thing that could have ever happened to us is YouTube. And I'm my heart so because we won't do our own work. So now with technology, as opposed to 35 years ago, I could come in a room, we have a piece of paper with ink on it, and we have to interpret this ink by ourselves. Now everybody just turns on YouTube, they listen to the way Jennifer Holliday did it, or they listen to the way somebody else sang the song, and they just come in and sing the song like that person did it. It has no connection. It's the work just hasn't been done to understand why are you singing it the way you're singing it. or even all the way down to the band, why you're playing it the way you're playing it. And so when everybody is in sync, you get this magic. But because of financial reasons, now, you know, band comes in at the end, just read some music off the paper. And it's just, you know, got to get it up as fast as we can. We don't have time to really work with it, to dig into it, to find the juice, as I like to say. And because when it's right, when you got 25 people on stage and 10 people in the pit and everybody's vibing off the same energy, that's magic.
Yeah.
Right. That's and I know Vaughn can weigh in on that because he's in that environment. So Vaughn, is there anything that you can add to what she was saying?
Yeah, she struck the nail directly on the head right there because, you know, it's it's spreading like wildfire, um, the way the music is being treated today. Um, I can sit back and remember as a child listening to a lot of Motown and Philadelphia International, and I mean, there was such a uniqueness in the quality of music back then. The jazz, of course, with Blue Note and Impulse and Verve Records and all these other recording companies. Um, there was such individuality and authenticity and heart, and my favorite word, soul, in the music. And, you know, over the last 25, 30 years, there's been just this flood of everyone sounding the same. And it's really breaking down the essence of what the creativity is, the honesty, the truthfulness, and most of all, the hard work, the dedication. You know, it builds laziness in the performer. And so, you know, no one's challenging themselves anymore. They're settled into what they want to do. And there's no, you know, bending the curve, you know, keep bending that curve to say what you want to say, you know, and it's kind of like problematic and it's kind of spreading out in all the way, all the things that are artistic endeavors, advancing those things is challenged with now. You know, you spoke about, you know, everybody's, you know, a one-trick pony. Back in the day, there were no one-trick ponies. They were just doing what they do, and they created magic. And sometimes, you know, I get a little depressed on what I hear and what I see, but it just takes, you know, platforms like this to be able to discuss these things. And I share a lot with what you said, Ms. Clark, because it's just, you know, and as a musician, I feel for you right now, but you can only do what you can do and keep moving forward in what you know is right and what's good. And these are some of the difficulties of people in radio or people who are into programming have to suffer with, you know. You know, I'm in debates all the time with the powers that be at Jazz Beats Radio, and you know, they're locked into what smooth jazz is. But there's a history to smooth jazz. There's an origin of it, and it rests with what I call the sounds of the vanguard, the Freddie Hubbards, the Stanley Turrentines, the Hank Crawfords, the Joe Samples and Wilton Felders of that time during the 70s and the 80s. And, you know, they created something that, you know, was magic. But folks today are not putting that work into
Well, that's probably because of
it.
like Renee was saying earlier, it's the distractions. The
Yeah.
technology is a good thing, but it's also a distraction when you're an artist. That distraction is what we now are seeing mostly, in what we do now. And it's like you said earlier, Renee, where, somebody would go check YouTube out and emulate what they saw on YouTube and not ever know where their own voice is,
Right.
and so those distractions were not present when, let's say, the pioneers and innovators of jazz was around. They've only been present within the last 20 years. I'm not exactly sure if that's how long YouTube has been available, but it somewhere, let's say, in the last 20 years, with the distractions of the technology, a lot of young artists are going that route instead of being taught, one-on-one in a human environment. So you can't express the same. It's not the same thing, you know. It's almost like now people are in this climate we're in now, where you got to homeschool your kids because of the environment right now. The children are having a problem with that, because they're being distracted at home. They're not focused. The learning issue is diminished, or is diminishing. Let's say it like that. From from a lot of the kids who aren't accustomed to being homeschooled, what I'm saying, now having to have to be homeschooled, but everything else in the world around them, in their world, which is their house, is going on. You know what I'm saying? So they're really distracted from learning at that point. Unfortunately, it spills over into everything. Just like Renee just said, uh, there is you can learn something, but where the essence is where it's lost. When Renee does a score for a play, I'm pretty sure she knows that. Well, I'm not going to see how this person does it on YouTube or wherever. I'm going to, try to pull it out of them, they pull it out of the soul of the people that she's working with, so that makes all the difference in how the performance actually goes over, you
Mhm.
know, because if you want to let you know how people say, well, uh, this person is playing jazz, but I wanted to hear him play it a certain way. Well, play the stuff, or play the Miles Davis thing. Well, you need to go put a Miles Davis record on. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't. There is not going to be another Miles Davis. That's just the bottom line. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I was talking to Ojita Penn a couple of years ago, and I was telling him my frustration in improvising. He says, Renee, um, improvisation is vocabulary. How do you increase your vocabulary? By listening. You have to listen. And so for the past 3 years, I would listen at a song, kind of listen, you know,
Yeah.
not listen to it, just
Right.
kind of listen, but not like really. So the best part of this pandemic has been me listening to music. And I have heard colors I've never heard my entire life by really just really sitting down listening, which all of a sudden my playing has grown and it's so amazing. And I can sit now and just play. It's almost like I've listened to all these poets and all of these philosophers, and I've got all this new stuff rolling in my head, and now I can just play. And what happened prior, and I think happens to a lot of younger people, is needing to sound a particular way. So when you come out, no matter what you play at home, when you get in front of people, you feel like you need to sound like Miles, or you need to sound like Blue Blue, or you need to sound like blah blah. But if you could just come out and just play you, then we could have some innovation again. There's just nothing. It's nothing fresh. We just keep we're playing it the same way. We're doing it the same way, and you're kind of shunned when you play outside of the box, um, which is a beautiful way to be a composer. You don't have to stay right here. I
Right.
mean, yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing, going back to finding your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that, it's a lot of variables to that, from, as a matter of fact, from your own, if you're a horn player, it's the way your armature is, you may have to change it a little bit. You may even have to change something physically on the horn
Mm-hmm.
just to get a certain sound. So it goes back to an individual, not wanting to necessarily play someone else's transcribed solo, but to actually approach the solo in their own voice, and make it make sense. That's the whole deal. So, Vaughn, I know that in like you as well as Renee, uh, what do you think about the rhythm of the actors now, versus this new uh, the technology end of it? In other words, like Renee was saying, that all the shows and plays almost have the same feel. So you can almost go to a play or something like that, and the rhythm will pretty much be just like the next play. Uh, what do
Right.
you think it needs to happen, in order for, or what are you looking for when you go out to see something like that?
Um, I think a lot of that responsibility rests with the playwright, and it has to do with the chemistry between him and the director. There's still some brilliant playwrights out there, and there's still some classic plays by some playwrights that really, I don't really think that their stories have really been told correctly. Um, and you would virtually have to have a rebirth in a lot of great theater. Um, don't get me wrong, I love Broadway. That's where a lot of the training comes from. But in no in no disrespect to musicals, I think there are not enough plays being done. Um, Great works, um, and it's to me, it's everybody's doing the same thing over and over again. And thank goodness for um, the guy who did the play Hamilton, to really challenge the artistic form of theater work, being able to blend in what's popular and current in pop culture to do what he did. But it's not enough of people like him um, in theater right now. So we had that little highlight, that little bright shining light for a moment, but then it's like we go back to what's the norm, you know. And it's going to be a struggle for some time until we get those new playwrights to do things that speak more to the cultural issues in America and still be able to hold that mirror up to society, you know, and say what needs to be said.
Well, Vaughn, wouldn't you agree? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Wouldn't you agree, though, theater 40, 50 years ago, the goal wasn't to have an audience of 1,200 people. The goal was the message or what you wanted to express. So if you had a house of 40 people, you were okay with that. You expressed what 40 people could understand or not understand, and it was okay. But everybody's just doing the same cookie cutter so that they can get to Broadway, so that they can have a house of 1,500 people or 2,000 people listening. It's the Disney way. This is what people like to listen to. So I
Right.
need a play that people want to buy.
Well, let's just cut to the chase. It's all about that green. you know, it's about how many butts you can put in them seats.
Yeah.
And so, it's we don't have I remember one of the first plays I had an opportunity to work on was Blues from Mr. Charlie by James Baldwin here in Atlanta. And it's just, when you grasp people like Baldwin's work, you know there's something extremely special about it, and those type, that play is out of the 60s, of course.
Mhm.
And, you know, we got our 40 to 50 people every night to come see the show, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, we would have loved to have 1,200 now if it was available. But we as performers still felt our mission was in the message of the play, you know, and that's how the music has gotten away from that, you know. The powers that be in the recording industry don't adhere to those standards and values that we had held high back in you know 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that's the problem. That is the sheer problem. And I, you know, like I said, I try to hold my peace a lot of times, but it's too many bean counters running the business right now.
I mean, this is gonna be around the world and back, but it's gonna make sense. But I think
Okay.
our palette in general, just like our palette and what we want to experience, taste, and feel has just like this. I had a friend that was visiting here in Atlanta from DC, and he went to Whole Foods and he just had a fit because it was the what was being offered was like, you know, macaroni and cheese and collard greens and just your regular, just he was like, where's the other stuff? And it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know why our clubs are like this, our food is like this, our theater is like this, our churches are like this. Everything is just, it's like we're boxed in and we think this is the right way to be.
Yeah, they're taking away our powers of choice. They've eliminated all of those things that, you know, we didn't have it. We didn't have the panoramic view anymore like we used to. You know, the what they call the screen. I can't think of it.
Mm-hmm.
The wide view.
Uh-huh.
Now we're looking through the world through a telescope, you know, which is extremely myopic, as you know. But as artists, you have to remain dedicated to what they're trying, be opposite to that, be contrarians, remain to be contrarians in your work, you know, because this is too big of a world to keep looking at it through a telescope. It's too big, it's too massive. And so, you know, that is one of the tenets to what I try to do with jazz. The music itself is too, you can't coin it with one title. You can't coin it with one phrase. It has literally influenced every other genre of music this country has ever created.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep. Yep.
Why keep arguing with that? Why keep pushing it to the side? Why put it in the background? Why is it still being underserved? Because it means much more than dollars and cents. It means humanity betters itself across all lines, across all ages, across all generations. It betters itself through the foundation of this music. So, you know, but I'm just being altruistic, you know, that's just me, you know.
Hey man, that's you. And what we're gonna do is Renee, how can people get a hold of you to follow you or to communicate? They may have things they need to ask. You have a website or anything that?
Not yet, Edwin.
Okay.
I
I had to ask though. You know how
know,
that
I
goes.
know. Yeah, I just got a Facebook page this year.
Well, that's something.
That's something.
Yeah.
Yep.
So look me up on S. Renee Clark. I'm at Facebook. I'll I'll do all the necessary things that I'm supposed to do.
Okay then. All right. So Vaughn, let them know where your platforms are.
It's going to be jazzbeatsradio.com, and that is our Jazz Beats Radio webpage. You'll see the bios, of course. You can always hit the listen live button to hear exactly what kind of music we're playing. Uh, And, you know, my show in particular, I'm across the board. I have no boundaries. I play stuff from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, of course, you got to play what's making money, and that's that smooth jazz right now. But I try to have that mixed bag. You know, I remember there was a DJ in Atlanta by the name of Bobby Jackson. He worked on one of the radio station, the one of notoriety here in the city of in Atlanta. He had a show called Midday Renaissance, and he walked that line. He was able to blend all of that stuff and make it work. And I was a big fan of his before he left and went up to Ohio to work for a radio station up there. And he had, you know, that's what I do. I try to, you know, bridge the gap and bring the world to Jazz Beats Radio. And I've been doing pretty good with it thus far.
Oh, cool. Well, you know, you can always get me at jazzmatters.org. And of course, like I said, when you go there, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and also check out the Jazz Matters apparel store. And Renee, I think the next time we talk, you will have a Jazz Matters t-shirt on of some sort.
Oh, yes, I will. And I'll have my mug in my hand.
That's right, just to show them that you're really serious. Okay, then, well, that's going to do it for us, because, you know, time moves pretty quick. So,
thanks for having me.
Thank you
so much.
Yes,
thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, that's going to do it for us now. And until we meet again, adios.